Oh, we've got a robot man with us tonight. Okay, or something new and different. Okay, a
Sorry about
couple
that.
of interesting image. Yeah, a couple of new. Sorry, welcome. A and B. I hope you saw my new emails. What I meant to say, and we will take a couple of minutes to talk about the positive, finally follow up news about my YouTube account. I sent, imagine some of you saw the negative one where I said that I couldn't welcome. Yeah, good timing. Um, yeah, the fact is that I had no way and no control and no way of knowing why, and it's irrelevant at the reason, whatever it was, that YouTube just suddenly froze me out of my own channel I've been using for over 2 years. There's never been a problem before. So at some point, I asked first my very tech-savvy wife and daughter, more so than I'll ever be, but they couldn't figure it out after multiple efforts on their website, on YouTube, the website, and thinking creatively. So I finally just decided to take a bit of a, you know, stab in the dark or whatever the phrase is to create a new channel. And that seems to have solved the problem, but it's a more complex step or process, I should say. There are more steps to being able to see my my YouTube videos, and they are on there now. So I hope you guys saw I sent an email. It was kind of late last night when I finally realized that I could do it this way. So here's, if you didn't see the email, well, you'll see it eventually, I hope. So I have it posted for 2 weeks. But in case later on, either you miss part of tonight, someone joining late, whatever reason later on, of course, for the final, you'll want to review from some of these, the second half. That's what I'm talking about. Every video starting with last week, I was afraid would have a trouble hosting, being able to let you have access. That's what I was really worried about for your sakes. Well, mine too. I mean, as a teacher. So I figured out a workaround. I created a second channel, a new one. And so what you have to do is just, bring up YouTube, the app, and then they have a window, a search window, of course, and put in like what you did before, but there's a slight difference to search before this glitch. Or if it was a glitch, I'll give you one theory in a minute, but the process is this. It's about a three-step process. First, you type in, like you did before, Mark Wilson's SRJC Art History Lectures, but then the number 2 right after the end of the word, no space. I don't know if that matters, but wait, right at the end of that phrase. Then what you'll get is a screen which allows you to, at first you won't see the videos, the ones I recorded last weekend posted, which I just did this weekend. There are 3, 2 for my afternoon class and 1 for this class. You have to look for in the upper right corner filters. And that's what I couldn't figure out, or neither my wife or my daughter, until finally decided to get that. What does that mean? Well, then it gives you a choice of today, this week, this month. So either this week or this month. Again, it's all in the email I already sent. But if you didn't see it, just click on one of those 2 and you'll see the 3 most recent videos. And the way you know that they are the newly posted ones under this newly created channel is because they have a green circle next to them instead of a brown one. Again, I have no idea. So I think it's either some weird design change or, system, whatever, alteration or revision at YouTube, but why wouldn't they notify people? I never saw anything about it. But one other theory is that it could be a group hack. When I say group hack, I mean some group overseas that decides to take over art and music videos. The reason I thought of that all from YouTube and then hijack them, is that the word? I don't know what other word there is. So they might be able to try and package some whole group of things. I know it sounds a bit far-fetched, but I have a friend who owns the Thai place. I'll give you a nice tip if you're ever in North Berkeley, my neighborhood. Go on Solano Avenue, right? It's Main Street of my neighborhood, and all the way to the top, and it's called Bangkok Jam. Excellent, excellent food. Great service, very friendly, local owned business. Point is that one of the women who's part owner of that, she asked me, how are your classes going? When I picked up my Friday night, when I sent you that bad news thing, because I was still being blocked out and I couldn't solve it. And she said, oh, I've heard of this happening. Of course, I have my own channel to promote the restaurant, but I have friends, one of whom is a teacher, a public school teacher, probably a high school teacher, didn't say what level. I shouldn't say college, but anyway, someone who uses a YouTube channel the way I do, and then someone else who does music videos, and both of them have had their accounts blocked, she said, recently, and they did some checking and found out it was some kind of a group hack from overseas in some country where they didn't have as many options for people in that whatever part of the world to take a look at. Maybe we're talking about in Russia, I don't know. Anyway, who knows what the reason is. It's now available, though, is the key here, that you can now see each of my videos. And as of this week, the videos from tonight, I will be posting, like I will each week until finals, that week's videos, art history lectures on YouTube under this new channel by 8 p.m. Friday. So the problem solved, sort of, but I have to wonder what was causing it in the first place. But it's pointless, I guess, to speculate unless anybody out there's had a similar, or knows someone, or knows of another teacher who's had this experience. I didn't do anything between the time I last posted videos and the time it froze up on me or locked me out. So it was nothing to do with anything I did. So whatever it is, it's a separate side affair, or effect, I should say, of some unknown force. But I worked around it, so hopefully that'll help you all. Any questions about that procedure, or for that matter, about extra credit is the other thing I always like to give you guys a chance before we start the lecture tonight, because what we have tonight, there's enough material. I thought about trying to just go all the way through and end extra early, but I don't think that's a good idea. There's enough new definitions and slides that I'm not cutting from the study list. So why don't we do our usual break, but it'll probably be a little earlier than our normal break time, depending on questions that you guys have. And then I think we can end early without rushing through any of the slides. I may, as I often do, cut one of them anyway. But there'll be at least 3 or 4 of tonight's slides that will be ones I'll always tell you, I always do when we start each of those slides, that this is a slide I won't be cutting from the study list. So you'll want to take extra thorough notes. Okay, before we get started, any questions about anything related to extra credit? Or well, now you know what the procedure, hopefully you do anyway. And if you needed to write it down and you didn't, go to your inbox, your email inbox, and you'll see the email with all the directions in there. All right. Any questions now? Because again, as always, at the end, I will stick around as long as there are any other questions after the lecture. Okay, so let's get a little context. I always like to start that way. India, as some of you know, is called a subcontinent. It's because it's such a large country and it has mountains, separating it from, mostly it's Russia. There were former Soviet republics, what was Central Asian Soviet Union republics above it, and then of course major rivers bordering it on either side from Pakistan and Bangladesh. So it's called a subcontinent because it's geography. And the thing is, as you may know, is India is the second largest population of any country on earth, just behind China. But at the rate it's growing, absolutely in the next most people say 4 or 5 years, by the middle of this decade, India will become the most populous country in the world. Well, that doesn't mean much, maybe abstractly, but if you think of it this way, that India has 1/3 of the land area the US has, but 4 times the population we have, 1.4 billion people. So you don't have to be, a genius in demography or arithmetic to figure out that means. In other words, what does that mean? India is 12 times more crowded than the United States. If you think our country's crowded, think of that. And then also, really the most important point, and what we're going to see tonight, the proof of this fact, is that India is one of the 5 oldest urban civilizations on Earth. In other words, that had cities before almost any other parts of the world. And we've already covered right? To a certain degree, those previous ones, as we're going to do with India, is kind of an overview, and that would be Egypt, ancient Egyptian, of course, culture, Babylonian culture, India, China, we'll cover next week, and then Central America, or some people say Mesoamerica. Those are the 5 oldest urban civilizations on Earth. So we're looking at one of those tonight. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with our first slide. Okay. And we're now going to go full screen just to make sure you guys can see this. Everybody can see this, right?
Yep.
Thank you. It always helps to get at least one confirmation of that before we proceed. All right, here we go. Our first must know. Here's one I'm not cutting from the study list, this first slide tonight. Bust, that's just the first word, bust of a man from Indus Valley. And that's a river that is on the border between, or near the border of India and Pakistan. So bust of a man from Indus Valley, INDUS Valley, of course. And the location, actually, it's Pakistan now, but it was all the same culture back in ancient times. Pakistan, the country today is Pakistan, the location, and the date 2000 BC or BCE. Well, let's start with the fact that the Indus Valley civilization is one of those where, you could say, a better way to write is where one of the 5 oldest urban civilizations on Earth began. It's on the western edge of what today is the country of India, or you could say it's an area that spans the border between India and Pakistan today. But back then it was called the Indus Valley Civilization. And one of those facts is that that's a very important part of the meaning, is that it's an Aryan culture. Now that word has gotten twisted in meaning in so many ways that it's a word that most people will even hesitate to even maybe use that word, but it is the right word, Aryan, and I'll explain how that applies to the meaning of this slide. Aryan, Aryan. That is just, in terms of history, a historical or anthropological term is the name of the area of India, the Indus Valley area of India / Pakistan, where most of Europe's linguistic groups originated. That's a major fact. Think about it. Most of the languages that are now spoken, European language, well, that includes obviously on this side of the Atlantic, right? What about anywhere English or French or German, any European language is spoken. The roots of those European languages are almost all of them are from India. And we know that those people migrated from the Indus Valley into Europe. That's a pretty major part of the history of the world that we're talking about. So it's obviously an important source or root, this area of modern world culture. Linguistically alone, it's extremely influential, or was an extremely influential culture. So just say many of the people from that area, that urban civilization, migrated across, Asia, that's obviously Asia, into Europe. And when they populated what is now Western, Central and Western Europe, or just say Europe, they started speaking languages that are the roots language of all European. Almost, you got to say almost all. There are 2 exceptions. You don't have to know the exceptions, but it might be of interest. Hungary and Finland. Isn't that odd? Those 2 little isolated pockets within Europe. Finland is the northernmost country in the world, by the way. Well, yeah, it is, because Iceland is far north, but northern Finland is even closer to the Arctic Circle. So we have the northernmost country in the world and one stuck in the dead center of Europe, Hungary, not a very large country. Those 2 languages, no one knows where they came from, the people or their language, but we know all of the other European peoples and languages. We're talking about actual genetic ancestry as well as linguistic roots of those rest of Europe. All the rest of Europe came out of what's now India. It's fascinating to know that. I think that is what we call it, the Aryan language group, or some people just say Indo-European language groups, which originated in this area, the Indus Valley. Okay, the other part of the meaning is, who is this guy? We don't know the name, of course. That's not possible. There's no written records as far back. What we know is he was almost certainly a high priest. And that's the other part of the meaning. A high priest. How do we know that? There are three clues, or indications, you can say, symbolic details. Okay. Oh, hang on. Let's see. Yes. Okay, good timing. Here we go. All right. We're just on our first slide. Bust of a man from Indus Valley. I won't spell it because it's on your syllabus. Our first must know. Okay, so the other part of the meaning about this, well, let's hide this here, is that he is a high priestess, and just say most historians believe, and I'm sure that's true because of the three clues we see here. One is his ceremonial headband. That's not just decorative, that we know from other artifacts in this area found in what's now India, that only high-ranking people of the Indus Valley civilization would wear those, and mostly priests. So that's almost a proof right there. Another indication is his beard. I think I've said this before, right? That the longer or more pronounced, more visible, how you want to say it, is a beard is in ancient cultures. It's not only in the Mediterranean or Europe and North Africa, but the longer the beard, the more important, wiser and more important the person was thought to be. Well, this guy's beard is obviously a very prominent feature of his face. The artist emphasized it. So that would be another clue that he was a high priest. Actually, there are four clues. The third one is the ornate, or you can say decorative pattern of his robes. I mean, these are three-leaf clovers, right? And they're very, again, prominent. They're emphasized. And the average, even middle, what today we call middle class, or, a merchant, say, or somebody like that, even an educated person wouldn't have had that kind of attire, and have someone make something special for them with symbols of nature like that. So that's another clue that he's a high priest. And finally, if that isn't enough, it's his expression, especially the eyes. His eyes are nearly closed, and that's what we call, and you're going to see several examples tonight of that in some of the other must-know slides, that when we have a portrait of someone where their eyes are either closed or nearly closed, that's called a contemplative or meditative expression. There's not really any other way to say that. Either of those two words would do. Contemplative, you can just write that how it sounds. Should be. Is it spelled contemplative or meditative expression? He's meditating. He's thinking. His mind is internally processing something, whether it's a prayer, a problem he's trying to resolve, some question about life or death. We don't know. It doesn't matter what the specifics are. It's that he's in a meditative or contemplative state of mind, which would fit, again, of course, with him being a high priest. Now, this bust has been damaged, obviously. One of my students said the bust has been busted. Okay, it's in a museum. I believe it's in India. You could just say, it doesn't matter where, but it's in a museum, and it was found in this condition, of course. But we think originally it would have been, in fact, there's no real guesswork, just the upper half of his body, which is why we don't call it statue or sculpture of. It's a bust is just the upper part of the body. Usually it's just the head, neck, and shoulders, but here we have what probably was from the waist or stomach up, and that's just been lost over the centuries. So it was found in this condition. All right, that's plenty on the meaning of this. This is so far back that it's pre-Hindu. So we'll get that definition. It's a pretty important definition. You see it's on your list of terms when we get to the first slide of Hindu site. Okay, let's do our formal analysis. It's balanced. I would say both ways. It depends, again, on how you draw, or where, I should say, you draw the line across his torso. But you can make the case the shoulders are wide enough. that if you drew the line about here, there'd be roughly equal mass. But I could see why some people might say, and it wouldn't be wrong, but because of the width of the lower 2/3 of this bust, that it's somewhat unbalanced toward the bottom. It's definitely symmetrical, so it's balanced left to right. The rhythm is obvious on the 3-leaf clover pattern on his robes, the right creases in his beard, or you're going to say, lines or carving in his beard. And of course, his eyes, he would have 2 ears. You don't see the other one, but it's definitely there. So those are all repeated shapes. And the details of his face and of the robe are done with carved line, of course. Now, this actually is a warm color. And I don't know why this picture makes it look cool, because I've seen even a documentary with it on it. And I'll tell you in another case, on the cover of a menu of one of the best restaurants in the East Bay. I'll get to that in a minute for a little extra tip if you ever come to Berkeley. But first, what color really is it? It's kind of it's almost like a brownish orange color. The real color of this, I don't know why this photo makes it look kind of, but even here you can see a little bit of a tan-ish tone to the color of it. So it's a warm color. It's actually reddish brown if you want to write it that way, even though the slide doesn't quite get that across. And then we have it being almost entirely stable. He's upright, and at some point, maybe if his arm was protruding outward, that would be dynamic. But since what we have is just barely the top of it, his torso, his head and neck, his pose is almost entirely upright and therefore stable. But of course, some details are dynamic on obviously the eyes to some degree, and the ears and the mouth and the jaw. So there's both, but it's more stable than dynamic. It's a single mass. The only technique for space is overlapping. The ceremonial headband, or you could just say headband, and the robe overlap his body. But it is also real space, a 3-dimensional object, of course, like all sculpture. It is roughly half life size. Well, a little more than that. It's about 2 feet tall, but people weren't only 4 feet tall then. So it's about a 2 foot tall, smaller than life piece of actual space. And there is no modeling. It's the lighting from the museum only. The similar texture is pretty good, though, on the beard. And I would say on the eyes and ears, and definitely the robe. But it also has, of course, the real smooth texture of the stone from which it's made. Let's see, I think that's it on this one. Okay, let's move on to the next must-know. Oh, my tip. Cabana, K-A-B-A-N-A, is the best Indian / Pakistani, well, basically Indian food, with a Pakistani family that owns it, family-owned business on University Avenue in Berkeley. Excellent place. And they use a photo of this from the actual correct color. It shows up on their menu. They used to put it on their business cards, but now they don't do that. Well, you probably can't get a menu there because since the pandemic, very few restaurants give them out, but their website will have this image because they're from Pakistan, and this is actually in Pakistan, I believe. Let me see. It could be in India, but I think it's in a museum in Pakistan. Okay, let's go on to, now there's the color of what it really looked like, but that's not related. So don't think of that as the missing part of the torso. That's just the color of the stone that last piece was. Now, these are from Stockstead, and so I get to the ones that are on the syllabus, so I'll skip through a number as we go in between each slide tonight. Okay, this next must-know is probably one of the two most important slides you're going to see tonight. Okay, so again, obviously that means I won't cut it from the study list, and you should take extra thorough notes. Okay, this is the Great Stupa at Sanchi. Great Stupa at Sanchi. That first word, well, stupa is spelled S-T-U-P-A, and Sanchi, this town in India, is S-A-N-C-H-I, India, and the date is 250 BC. So what is a stupa? Okay, it's our first definition for tonight from the list of terms you see there. The stupa it can be either a Hindu or Buddhist. It could be either a Hindu or Buddhist house of worship with a large central dome comma. I'll repeat this whole thing again. Hindu or Buddhist house of worship with a large central dome, beneath which worshippers walk in a clockwise direction, beneath which worshippers walk in a clockwise direction around a collection of religious relics, period. Around a collection of religious relics. So one more time, if you want to repeat that, anybody? They need me to repeat the whole thing. Okay, you got it. All right, just make sure. Because that definition will very likely come up either on this, for this slide.
Could you repeat it, please? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, it's a Hindu or Buddhist house of worship with a large central dome, comma, beneath which worshippers walk in a clockwise direction around a collection, excuse me, of religious relics. That's with an ICS, in case you never wrote that word, relics. Every religion has those, has relics at some point, whether they call them that or not. Well, what matters is that this is one of the, for the notes now on the meaning of this slide, that this is one of the oldest stupas in its intact. So you could say one of the oldest intact or original, if you prefer to say it that way, stupas in all of India, which right there makes it, you can guess, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It absolutely deserves that. It has all the features of the early Hindu stupas. So now let's define Hinduism, our second definition. Hinduism. Now I put Hinduism, Buddhism in a different order here, but that shouldn't be a problem. You see it there near the bottom of the page we've been on here for tonight's list of terms to know. We've done stupa, so now Hinduism, right? Here we go. Hinduism is a religion that began in India about, or you can use a little c for circa, that's the short way of saying about 2000 BC or BCE, comma. There's no way to shorten these definitions. This and Hindu and Buddhism are both long definitions, but they're so important that you definitely should expect one or both of them to appear on at least the true false section, you know, of the final. I'll say it again. It's a religion that began in India about 2000 BC, comma, which believes in a multitude of deities, you know, gods, if you prefer to write gods or put it in parentheses, but the preferred word is deities, because no one of them is a god per se. I'll explain that in a few minutes. Okay, so again, the second part of the definition is Hinduism believes in a multitude of deities which can transform themselves from a spiritual condition, which can transform themselves from a spiritual condition into a gross body condition, period. There's a very straightforward and easy to understand explanation for this, and you'll see as we go. I'll repeat that. I assume some of you may want me to one more time. Hinduism is a religion that began in India about 4,000 years ago, or you could say 2000 BC, either one, right? They mean the same thing, comma, which believes in a multitude of deities that can transform themselves from actually the right word is from a gross body state. Yeah, that's the better phrase. I apologize. I say condition's okay, but you should probably just change that to state. That's the phrase used as translated in English in stock state. So I'm using the term that experts in Hinduism would say. I'll say it again, which can transform themselves from a spiritual state into a gross body state, period. Okay, now, since I did alter slightly, I apologize. Is there any need to repeat the whole definition from start to finish one more time?
Me, please.
Yes? Okay, well, I'll say it again. Hinduism is a religion that began in India about 2000 BC or BCE, comma, which believes in, see, there I go, which believes in, I apologize, a multitude of deities, okay, that can transform themselves from a spiritual state into a gross body state, period. Now, the explanation of that will be even more clear as we go along, but just a short explanation is pretty easy to understand. They're deities, which means various types of gods. There is no one super powerful God over all of them, the way Christianity and Islam believe. So they believe in a multitude of deities, right? They each have different powers, but all of them exist somewhere in the universe as spirits, but they can come back down to earth and transform into actual flesh and blood. You see the point there of that definition. Okay, I hope that's clear. So that's what's meant by they can transform themselves from the spiritual state into a gross body state. That's what they mean. Okay, so a stupa is a place where you would worship one or more, well, actually, usually several of those or many of those deities. They have hundreds of deities. So the most important ones, though, there's only, a few dozen, maybe a couple of dozen, but just say that several, keep it simple, several of the Hindu deities could be worshipped, if not all of them even, inside this stupa. When you're there inside, if you're a believer in Hinduism, you would be praying or chanting, whatever phrase you prefer to use, meditating, praying, or chanting to one or more of the Hindu gods while you walk around the collection of relics from supposedly that god, right? Or more, it wouldn't be just that one god, but from one or more. Now, if this is a Buddhist stupa, the relics would be from the life of Buddha. Okay, so that's the only difference. The building would look the same. The people going there would be worshiping Buddha and or Buddhism and not Hindu gods. But the structure, the design of the stupa would be the same, whether it's Hindu or Buddhist. All stupas have gates with lintels. Remember lintels from Stonehenge, right? Lintels across the opening of the gate with carved, bas-relief is the right word. You could say bas-relief or just carved figures of their deities. These are some of the sacred images to Buddhists. Elephants are sacred. As some of you may know, cows, lions, various just say sacred animals, and you can say gods if you prefer. Deities is the preferred word. The Hindu translations usually use that word, but you can say gods or deities. So there are several Hindu deities carved here, as well as sacred animals to the Hindu religion, like a winged lion, right? Obviously elephants. And somewhere in here, there are cows. I don't remember where, but I know I've read enough times. So these are on the lintels. In other words, each stupa has at least one gate with lintels that are carved above the actual entrance, and on the carved figures are images, or within them are images of some of their deities and their sacred animals. You can keep it simple like that. So that's what this shows. Also, all Hindu stupa, or just say stupas, because it could be either Hindu or Buddhist. All stupas have these, some people look at these and say discs, right? Actually, the right word is finials, with disc-like, right, segments pointing towards not heaven. Don't write it that way. That's a Christian and Muslim concept. So not towards heaven, but towards enlightenment. But you can say pointing towards the sky if you prefer, or the universe, which is symbolic of the quest for enlightenment. Both religions, Hinduism and Buddhism, both teach that we should, in our daily lives, we should try to become more enlightened before we die, about the meaning of life and death and all, obvious things that religions address or try to. So again, the final thing to say about all the feature of all stupas is that they all have a finial. There's no other word for that, F-I-N-I-A-L, which is almost every style of architecture. Public buildings have at least in the early periods of their history, a point at the top above, the rest of the building. Well, that's on top of the dome, of course. So a finial with disc shape, right? Levels, or you can say segments, pointing upward towards the sky, to symbolize the quest for enlightenment. Well, let's take another look here. I think I have a close up.
I have a question.
Sure, please. That's
Are these like the gods, the sculpture, like the ones that I exposed at the Asian Museum?
yes.
Oh,
I think I've gotten a lot of extra credit, but if you want to go ahead and remind me, yeah, I remember receiving it, but
I went, but honestly, I don't know anything about like Hinduism or something, so I was like sort of confused.
yeah, I understand. Yeah. But the museum does, or do you tell me, I haven't been there since before the pandemic. Does the Asian Museum, you were there recently, right? Have a good explanation on the wall next to the best museums have a,
Yeah, I did because I attend a lecture online.
Oh, okay.
And they were talking about like Shiba or Shiba.
Oh, we're going to talk about Shiva tonight. That'll be our last.
Yeah, but
yeah, you'll
but
learn.
I didn't quite understand because I don't know like.
Well, oh, sure.
Yeah.
That's well there. Yeah, I grew up with this a quick aside, but I think it's still in print. Time Life books, they were called. Time and Life magazine were the two biggest magazines on the planet Earth when I was growing up. There was no internet and there was no other source of information besides TV news, and printed newspapers. So I had the one called The World's Great Religion. And if it wasn't for that, I'd probably be totally out to lunch about the differences between them. It was a well-written text, and I'm sure if it's still in print, it's been updated many times. But when I was in middle school, I think I read that book. Yeah, but there are the good books, but you don't need to know the details to, do well on our exams. But I think it's important to understand some of the minimal, that's why I gave you these definitions. And you're going to hear one about after the break, well, maybe before the break, about Buddhism. And just to understand what their main beliefs are, right? The overall core concepts, you can say, or ideas of each of those religions. And it helps because, there's more in common than there's not in between world religions. And of course, if you don't want to subscribe to any religion, that's your business. But for the exam, the purpose of this class, you just need to know the minimum information. So, but thank you for bringing that up, because that is a good suggestion for extra credit. The Asian Art Museum is a really good museum right downtown, across the plaza from City Hall. Has a BART station, but you probably would want to drive and park in their underground parking lot where cars are safely, parked down below, right? Even then, don't leave things out. You know how it is in San Francisco. You got to watch out wherever you park, if it's on the street, not leave valuables in plain sight. But anyway, that's an underground parking garage with an attendant. So it's right below the museum. So I mean, you just go up the elevator or stairs and you're right in front of the museum. It's Civic Center Plaza, right across from City Hall, San Francisco. It's a good museum. The Asian Museum has a good cafe, good gift shop. 10 points extra credit, like you did, right? For anyone who wants to show me the receipt of, or ticket stub by PDF. And of course, you would need to probably take a screenshot for that. Okay.
I was there earlier in the year. They had
Oh.
this, exhibit of a bunch of projected things on the walls.
Oh, I
interactive.
missed that. The immersive thing? Is that what you said?
Well, it was
Oh,
like an
that-
immersive thing,
Oh.
not the Van Gogh thing, but like the other. They had like butterflies and flowers and
I think it was a different level of immersive, though, wasn't it? Wasn't it projecting with lasers?
In continuity lab.
Did you see that too?
Yeah, because I work in a nursery home. So there was a free admission for the essential worker.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, because of course one day a month, almost all San Francisco art museums have free admission, and I didn't know this. The De Young every Saturday has free admissions for anyone who lives in one of the 9 Bay Area counties, which would include everybody in this class, unless you live if you're way down in Monterey, I doubt you're taking this class, but we're way north in Mendocino. But if you're in the Bay Area proper, Sonoma, all the way from Sonoma County down to Santa Clara County, it's free on Saturdays. And I recommend that museum too, because it has both mainstream Western paintings and art, and it has world art from all over the world. The De Young in the Golden Gate Park, and the parking garage is literally below the museum there. Totally safe. I just went there with my wife on Sunday and saw the Pomo exhibit, and I would recommend that. It's only gonna be there till Sunday, And even though we don't test on that in this class, I do in my other online class. We don't cover that particular culture. I don't think, unless maybe let me just double check. It could be that I included the unit on that, but I think we already covered that. Yeah, we did. Yeah. So what we're going to do is now go back to a view. I wanted to just see. Yeah, there we go. That's one of their goddesses. That's not Shiva though. Shiva, the one that you mentioned earlier, right, is going to come up at the end of this lecture tonight, our last must-know. But this is one of the goddesses of fertility. And she's symbolizing fertility of the land as well as human reproductive fertility with both her physique and what she's holding up is all these ripe fruits and, produce. You could say, well, you say produce. No, natural from just nature, right? Bananas, obviously, and other fruits. And that's on this lintel. In fact, there she is right there. So that's one of those goddesses that you'd see. All right, I think you get the idea that this is a classic example of and one of the oldest surviving stupas in the world, and it's specifically Hindu, and we know that because of the carvings on the lintels. Okay, that's plenty on the meaning. Let's do a formal analysis. Well, this is an odd angle. It's the best shot I could find on the, well, it's actually from Stockstead, so it's the best shot they had available. And I can tell you, though, I know from, I've done research on it, that it's totally symmetrical. You probably guessed that. It's the dome, right? Left to right, it's symmetrical. If you were to stand right here in the middle of the gateway and look up, this is also symmetrical. Although some people say, wait a minute, there's a piece here. Well, it's missing. There was one up here that would have been the same, and it's missing. So just say that it is basically symmetrical or totally balanced left to right, but obviously unbalanced toward the bottom as it gets wider. Then we have, for space, it's a large open domed room with about a 60-foot high ceiling. And then the lintels have overlapping. That's the only technique for space. The figures of the sacred, images of the animals, their sacred animals and their gods or deities, they overlap each other. So there is that technique for space. The largest mass, that's easy, the dome. Then it would be the outer, these are not the gate. So the gate would be the third largest. But if you count this as one mass, the fence, right? Or railing, if you prefer that word, railing around the outer edge would be the second largest mass. And then the lintel, unless you want to separate this inner railing from the dome it's attached to, but I wouldn't do that. So that would make this the third largest mass, the gateway itself. The rhythm is obvious, right? It's made out of blocks of stone, right? And then the railings have these, obviously slats. And of course, the lintels have the same shape, and on each lintel are dozens of repeated shapes of the various gods and animals. So plenty of rhythm. It's dynamic on the dome and the railings. I would say also the fitting, if you want to get that specific, that detail. Whereas the gateways, the lintels particularly, and the post, remember post and lintel, those are stable, but the figures on them, most of them are stable, but you could make the case that some of the deities, like this fertility goddess, clearly over on that corner, some of the details are dynamic. All of the texture, and it's realistic simulated texture on the figures, carved figures, is done with carved line, right? But the texture of the rest of the structure, the dome itself and the railings, is all the real texture. The railings are real smooth stone, and the dome is rough stone. It would have been covered over with earth or even bricks thousands of years ago, but that's worn off, and they've just basically left the underlying framework of the stone, and that's rough. So rough, real texture on the dome. There's no technique for modeling here, just the shadows from the sun that can be created. And then let's see, I think we've covered it, stable, rhythm, dynamic. I said the line is carved. Well, there's some, you have to get, the visual line is around the edges of the lintels, but you can just say there's, carved line on the lintels. All right, moving ahead now to skipping over this to the next must know that we have time for here. This one is really important. I'm not cutting this one. This is a standing Buddha from Sarnath. Standing Buddha from Sarnath. Standing, of course, everyone knows well that Buddha. You probably have seen that word spelled, but it's the name of the man who founded Buddhism. Buddha. Buddha. Standing Buddha from Sarnath. That's a town in India. Sarnath, India, 474 AD or CE. Okay, so that begs the question, what is Buddhism? Many of you have a good, clear idea, maybe even feel that some of their teachings are relevant for you. I have always had respect for Buddhism and many friends who are devout Buddhists, and some of them are, European Americans or what you want. They're not at all Asian in their heritage, but they've adopted Buddhism, as well as people I know from countries with Buddhist majorities who were raised as Buddhists. So what is Buddhism? Here we go. It's a long definition. It's a religion that began in India. Notice 2 major world religions, same country, same origin. It's a religion that began in India about 500 BC or BCE, which teaches that there is an 8-fold path to enlightenment. That is the key concept behind Buddhism, which teaches that there is an 8-fold path to enlightenment. Of course, that's with an E-L, just like it sounds, enlightened, to be enlightened, which teaches that there is an 8-fold path to enlightenment. And then here comes the main part of the definition of the longer part, which includes right thinking, right speech, right action, right livelihood, and right thought. I already said right thought, sorry. I'll say it again, which includes right thinking, right attitude, right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Again, right thinking, right attitude, right speech, right action, and right livelihood, meaning do the right thing. Now, I'm not quoting the Spike Lee movie. If you don't know the movie, it's a great movie, one of his first movies, but that's not what I'm talking about. It's not a political phrase or a single concept. It means in everything you do in life, you should not harm other creatures. Whenever possible, you should avoid harming others. That's another way of saying that. Now, that's not part of the definition. So I've already given the definition. I hope you all have that now. That it definitely will come up somehow, either with a slide essay part or on the definition section, the true false section of the final. And this slide, again, has a high probability of being on the final. So in other words, you have to do the right things when you think correctly. You shouldn't speak it in harmful ways. You should act in, careful, consideration of others, right? And your actions should not, harm other people, and how you make a livelihood. All of those things, you should not harm other people. So let's see. Who was Buddha? Well, that's the main part of the meaning of this slide. Now, for the notes on this slide, you should be taking carefully, because, again, very good possibility it'll be on the slide essay part of the final. Buddha was the man who founded this religion of Buddhism. Some people prefer to call it a philosophy, and I can understand why, but most people call it a religion, one of the world's major religions. He founded this religion, but only after leaving behind a life of power and luxury. He was the prince. His father was an emperor. He could have just stayed in the royal palace and inherited his father's kingdom, but he gave it all up. Some of you know this story. If you do, you don't need to write it, but if you don't, you should. So he willingly, as a young man, I think he's like 20 or something, he left his father's kingdom and wandered for years throughout India, seeking enlightenment, meaning a meaning to life, something more meaningful than wealth and power. Finally, one time he had an epiphany. He sat down and meditated beneath them. It was a magic tree. That's all you have to say. There's a name for it. I don't exactly remember the name, but it was, a certain kind of tree that gave him a chance to meditate on the meaning and purpose of life. So after years of wandering, in other words, throughout India, he sat down one day underneath a magic tree and meditated. I think it was for days, for just say a long time. And he finally came up with an epiphany. There's not really any other word. You could say revelation, if you prefer, I guess, or epiphany, that the source of all human suffering is desire. Well, that's pretty straightforward and pretty elementarily obvious and wise, but most people don't think of that. But he did. In other words, the more we desire, the more we conflict. Obviously, you have to write this, but that's the way he was thinking, is that this is why people have conflicts and why people aren't happy and why they're unsatisfied and why they create everything from, poverty and violence and crime to war, like we see happening in Ukraine right now. So, and other parts of the world, obviously. So he was trying to get people to stop having these conflicts if they disavowed, you can say, or rescinded their desire. That's it. I would call it rescinding, or withdrew. You could even say from their desires as much as possible. Of course, being human, we can't do everything perfectly throughout our whole lives, but he would say we should strive for a state of enlightenment where we don't have these desires and this unhappiness, and that therefore will reduce or remove conflict if everyone could do it, supposedly. Okay, so this statue of him is how we're just gonna say most historians, right? Most historians believe he might have actually looked. It's so different than the kind of images of the seated Buddha, the heavy set, if not fat, laughing Buddha, cross-legged, in gift shops on Grand Avenue in Chinatown. I mean, that's another image of Buddha that is, in its own way, just as valid, but it's not as likely to be accurate. We know that he was tall and thin. He didn't eat a lot because he was busy trying to enlighten people. So he spent the rest of his life, decades, wandering throughout India, trying to, convince people of this new way of living, this new religion, if you prefer, you could say this new philosophy of life about getting rid of greed and desire and becoming enlightened as much as you can. So the details on here that tell us that this is him, preaching is probably too Christian a term, but you could say that, preaching or trying to convince people to join. He did preach, though. He did. He talked to large groups of thousands of people sometimes. Toward the end of his life, he became famous. So he began to get crowds following him wherever he went or showing up wherever he spoke. So he did, you could say preach if you want to. So you could say this is him, giving, a meditation or talk, or just say preaching about his philosophy, his beliefs, his religious beliefs about this way to live, to avoid, greed and desire and become enlightened. So his hand being raised is the key detail here. That is the opposite of what we in the West, most Western artists would mean. Stop, stay back. It's just the opposite in Eastern religions, and both Buddhism and Hinduism. When they show a figure, an enlightened figure, especially Buddha, with the hand palm out, it means welcome, come closer to listen, to hear me and think about what I'm saying. So he's inviting people to join him in this new religious or philosophical belief. Another thing about him is his eyes are closed. We've already mentioned that's a contemplative pose. It's a universal almost way of depicting a human being deep in contemplation or meditation. So he's probably thinking about what he's going to say and how he's going to say it once the crowd gathers, right? And he's ready to speak. So he's in a contemplative or meditative state of mind. Is clearly symbolized by his closed eyes. Also, he has these elongated earlobes, and no one I've ever talked to can explain why. I don't think he wore super heavy earrings when he was a young man in the palace. We know he didn't do that once he left his father's palace. Suppose his father came and listened to him speak and was very moved and decided to try and follow his son's teaching. Isn't that interesting? And then if that's not enough, we have, Yes, he was well endowed. Right? Well, just leave it at that. But it's a very thin, transparent robe he's wearing. He dressed very minimally. First of all, it was very hot and humid as it is most of the time in India, but also because he didn't want to wear fancy clothing. But the final clue that this is, Buddha in a state of meditation and, enlightenment is the halo. Now, the two people who went to the Asian Art Museum, did you guys see the room full of standing Buddhas? Because there's a whole room of these at the Asian Art Museum.
Yes.
It's
Yeah,
pretty neat, isn't it? Some of them are taller than others, some a little fancier, but they almost all show him as tall and thin. And the ones that aren't broken, yes, that's a broken halo. Looks like a giant plate stuck to the back of his head. One of my students said, no, supposed to be a symbol of his enlightenment, or we would call it halo in Western.
there's a
And it's
bunch
both.
of there's a bunch of them in Thailand, and all the heads were knocked off.
Oh, how did that
Um,
happen? From
There was some sort of war. I don't know who
the
did it.
Japan? No, it wouldn't be the Japanese. They were Buddhists when they occupied Thailand. They were pretty brutal, but it was
Yeah,
probably earlier than that. Could even have
Yeah.
been the Christian colonists.
and there's like
missionaries.
this tree, and the Buddha, the head of the Buddha is in the crook of the tree. And you're
Interesting.
there's something about not standing over the head. You're supposed to get down to like ground level and look at it.
Oh, well, I hadn't heard that. Yeah, well, since that's not something I was familiar with or Stockstead goes into, it's interesting to bring it up, because also you could get extra credit if you want to forward an article about that aspect. Maybe, I don't know if that was in a museum. You said a museum in Thailand. You haven't been to Thailand. I've been to Vietnam and Korea and China and lots of Asia, but on the coast mostly. Thailand is southeast, right, Asia. So if anyone wants to, again, you have everyone the same opportunity to send in a link to an article that has to do with any of the art. It doesn't have to be from our syllabus. Any artist or of artistic, movement, style, whatever, or type of art, 2 or more pages long. And just, of course, make sure you turn it into a PDF and or a direct link with your name and the class you're in. You get 5 points. So if you want to do that I don't know if you can find that museum you went to, wherever it was, I'd be interested to read that. Anyway, so let's wrap it up on this one, and then we'll have to decide. I think we'll do one more slide and then take a break. All right, so this figure almost entirely stable. Really, there is nothing dynamic about it except the top of his head. Well, his eyes, of course, but those are small details. There would have been a much more dynamic quality to the background if the halo was not broken. And then we have carved line creates a simulated texture, very realistic on his face and his hand and his body, his muscles. But we also have the rough, real texture of the stone. This figure here is about half-life size, as I recall. I'll tell you another clue, no one's going to get here during this semester. Well, maybe one or two. Well, Chicago, the Art Institute of Chicago, one of the greatest museums on earth. And if you think I'm exaggerating, talk to people who've been there, okay? And not just me, because I know I'm from Chicago. I grew up practically half my childhood in that museum. My parents both met there. Besides being a world-class school of art and architecture, it also has one of the greatest collections of paintings on earth, and it also has a new wing of Asian art. It's fantastic. They have hundreds of Buddhists from all over the world, and some of those are life-size, but this one isn't. This one is about half life-size, like most of the ones at the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco. So it is, in terms of space, a real object, roughly half life-size, with overlapping, of course, of the robes over his legs. Really, that's all you see here. And I guess you could say his body over the halo behind him. There's no technique for modeling. It's just the modeling from the museum lights. There is carved line everywhere. Of course, that creates the simulated textures. There's no painted line. It's a cool off-white or gray. No, so I should say gray color. It's not warm. And then let's see. The rhythm is obvious with the arms, hands, legs, right? The face, the features in the face. It's totally balanced, completely symmetrical. And if you drew the line across the middle, it'd be balanced top to bottom and left to right. It might not have been when the halo was complete. It might have been a bit top heavy, but it isn't now. Okay, am I forgetting anything? The rhythm, balance, texture, modeling. I think we got it all. Okay. Oh, masses, sorry. He's the largest mass. Then I guess his robe, but you don't see much of it. But I guess you could say that it's implied that it covered most of his body, and then the fragment of the halo. Okay. A quick aside, I think some of you know what the Taliban did the last time they ruled. I'm talking about the heritage that they took over in Afghanistan, which was a Buddhist culture. These were the largest statues of Buddha on earth. They were over 150 feet tall, and they were nearly 2,000 years old. And pardon my French, I think I can say it this way, as an art historian, Taliban dynamited them into rubble. What gave them the right to do that? Nothing, of course. Respect for previous cultures isn't always present in any history of almost every country's had. But in this day and age, that was a war crime, not against human beings, but against World Heritage. These were World Heritage sites. There were 3 of them, and they were all just reduced to rubble now. Okay, so let's go to, here we go. The next must know. And this one is Eternal Shiva from Cave Temple. Eternal, right? The word eternal, Shiva, S-H-I-V-A, from Cave Temple, India, circa 500 BC or BCE. Okay, let's start with the fact that this is in a cave underground in India during this period, this early period of Buddhism. Many, not all by any means, but just say many of their temples and their early Hindu temples were made carved from caves, which for one thing, it's cooler because of the climate. That's one reason. And then also they were safer, both for the works of art inside from potential damage in the weather. It's pretty harsh in the monsoon season, right, in the rainy season, or from vandalism. So it was safer both for the works of art and for the worshipers, because there was crime. And Buddha even, I think, addressed that, how to deal with the anger you feel if you or someone was robbed or something like that. So to avoid damage both from human vandalism or crime and from the weather, they often put their temples inside caves underground, of course. This is gigantic, this piece. Shiva is the most powerful, well, some people would dispute, let's say one of the most powerful Hindu gods. But is Shiva a he, a she? What pronouns would Shiva use? All of the above. Interesting, isn't it, that that's come around now to more common usage in this day and age. But what we're looking at is a dual identity, or multiple, some people would even say identity god, because this is both, Shiva is both a male and a female god or goddess. So both a goddess and a god with 3 heads, at least in many images of Shiva. Shiva, I can't really say he or she, right? Or it. It's really, Shiva is shown with 3 heads, as is this large or larger than life image of Shiva shows. The face usually head facing forward is usually shown with a very kind of non-emotional expression, but in see the eyes are closed. And the word we've been using all night really are the 2 words, contemplative or meditative state. And with a very large or prominent, you can see the way, or detailed and very large or prominent headdress. And then the 2 side, the heads on either side are also shown in a contemplative state of mind, as you see here, or meditating on either side. And Shiva here, if you see the whole thing, you'd probably be able to see how the body is posed. But since we don't have that, you will on the very last slide tonight, I'll be able to tell you more in detail, because there's an entire figure of Shiva that is in metal, metal sculpture. And then there's more detail to describe. So all we can say is that the rest of Shiva's body is often, you say usually, but we can't really say for sure that. So we'll say often depicted as doing some kind of a dance, which symbolizes Shiva's power over life and death, because Shiva was so powerful, one of the, if not the most powerful Hindu god. Why? Because Shiva had power over life and death, creativity and destruction, the negative and positive forces of the universe, both equal power over both. And that's what the multiple heads symbolize, as well as a pose often showing Shiva dancing with multiple arms. That I've never seen an image of Shiva without 4 arms at least, sometimes 6. So just say multiple arms are usually, or almost always shown in any figure depicting, whether it's a sculpture, stone, metal, or miniature, gigantic. This one's larger than life. It's about 12 feet tall. So usually, or almost always, again, Shiva is shown in a dancing pose with multiple arms, and usually with 3 heads, which symbolize Shiva's multiple powers, you could say, or powers over the destructive and creative powers of the universe, over life and death. And also the dual nature of the gender aspect, both male and female aspects of human beings are encompassed or included in Shiva's being, you could say, and visible on the body, but we only see, of course, the face and shoulders here. All right, so that's the whole meaning. So let's do a formal analysis. Okay, so this is a cool gray color that's the actual color here, as I recall. Let me see, I might have another image, but I don't think I do. No, I don't. So let's just focus on this. It is a black and white photo, but I have seen color photos, so I can tell you it's mostly a cool grayish, light gray color. So it's not warm. There is simulated texture here, and that is on the headdress and on the face and on the necklace. That's all we can see in this image. So the facial features, headdress, and necklace have, you could say, detailed or very sharp simulated textures. And of course, the simulated textures are all done with carved line. There's no painted line here. I don't know if they ever use paint. Yeah, they did in frescoes of Shiva, but here, of course, it's not. It's a 3-dimensional object. And as far as space goes, it is a larger than life image, roughly 12 feet tall, of a god deity. You could just say deity. Say god or goddess to get into the whole gender thing. So you could just say of a deity, which is larger than the actual image of the deity itself would be. So larger than life is what larger than the human figure would be, about twice life size. But there is the technique of space, obviously, of overlapping. The headdress overlaps the forehead, and the necklace overlaps the chest there. Yes.
I just wanted to add, there was a point in time where I was going to this ashram where I live, and I remember the guru guy there talking about how the union of the masculine and the feminine energies in the universe, and how the Shiva, it's called Shiva Shakti. And so Shiva is like the masculine, and then Shakti is like the feminine, and
that's a more
the two energies in the universe. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, but I've always read that Shiva had, at least in the early, now this is very early incantations or early phase of Hinduism, inherently in and of Shiva's own being, there is the duality of the gender within Shiva, him or herself. Yeah. So it could be there's a variation on that, or further development. And again, that's a subject, if you care to, you or for everyone to know, of course, is always an option for all my students to maybe look into that more yourselves and find an article that explains it more in detail if you feel like it, and forward it to me for 5 points extra credit. Okay, so let's do the rest of the formal analysis, and then we'll take a break. Here, the modeling is from torches. What else would it be? It's from artificial lighting inside the cave. it could only be torches this far, but now, of course, it's lit by electric lights. So there isn't a technique for modeling, but modeling makes it possible to see the figures. So modeling does have an effect on the composition, but it's done from the lighting inside the cave. If this was outside, it would obviously be the lighting from the shadows of the sun. And then we have, it is stable more than it is dynamic. Look at the headdress and the pose. Overall, the shoulders are broad and wide, and this is a very tall, straight, upright pose. The heads on either side, the second and third, or side heads, if you want to call them that, those are tilted slightly downward. That's true. So you could say there's a hint of dynamic, but the top of the three headdresses all are dynamic, and obviously the necklace and the mouth and eyes, but the pose is stable. So it's both. It's balanced. Well, depends on how you want it. Again, where you draw the line. What we see here in this photo, you could make the case that it's unbalanced toward the bottom, but definitely symmetrical left to right, balanced left to right. But if you saw the whole figure, the whole body, like the human body itself, it would be then overall, it would be balanced top to bottom as well. And there really is, I guess you could say, two masses here. If you want to count Shiva's body, including the three heads, as one mass, and then the headdresses, you'd have to say the middle headdress is the largest. Obviously, it's much more prominent and taller. And then the two side headdresses. Let's see, I think we covered texture. I didn't do it. Yeah, texture is the rough texture of the stone, and then the semitic texture on the headdresses, and to some degree rather limited semitic texture, but there's some on the mouth and the eyes on all three heads. Okay, it's 7:45, so we're taking an early break. I'm going to go ahead to what the next must-know will be, but we won't start on it until we get ready, and that'll be this slide. It's a really important one I won't cut, but let's take a 20-minute break. Is that okay? About 8:05, and then we're going to be able to end early, maybe even as early as 9 o'clock or so, but I don't want to rush because these are important topics, and I really am glad to hear people participating, commenting, adding information. That's welcome at every stage in any of my classes. Okay, so I'll see you guys in 20 minutes, 8:05. All right. Okay, let's resume, pick up where we left off. And after we finish, just a heads up, after we finish the slides for tonight, the notes, then you might want to stick around for 2 or 3 minutes, or depending on if there's any questions, maybe just a few minutes, to give you again a bit of a update, reminder, refresher, whatever, on your papers, your second short papers, because they're coming up in not too distant future. But I'll mention those facts at the end of the lecture, and then of course stay around for any questions that you have. Okay, so this is the next must-know slide. This one I'm not cutting from the study list. It is Kandariya, that's one word, I'll spell it, of course, Kandariya Mahadeva Temple. And that's, first word is Kandariya Kandariya Mahadeva. And that's the second word, Mahadeva, Mahadeva Temple. The location, India, and the date at little c, again, is about circa 1000 AD or CE. So let's start with the fact that this is a mid-medieval. Now see, the word medieval has a European connotation, and we will cover European medieval art when we get toward the last few weeks of the semester. The last segments are on early mid and late medieval art in Europe. But the term has come to mean, so this is part of the meaning, when we say it's an early medieval, I'm sorry, mid, I said early, I misspoke. I said it right the first time, a mid-medieval style stupa. This is a stupa. Remember, that's a house of worship. In this case, it is a Hindu house of worship, being in India, right? It's not Buddhist. Okay, we'll say what marks it as a stupa, but also what marks it as different than the early periods of stupas, Hindu stupas, as we go. But just to make sure I clarify what it means to say in India, they have a Middle Ages? No, but we use that, historians use that term as a common reference point, just like we use Greenwich, England, right? For longitude and latitude, there has to be some common referencing, you know, of points of comparison. So when we say that, we mean the same period in Europe when they were in the mid-Middle Ages. But we use that term to describe periods, historic periods in Asia and other parts of the world as well. So this is a mid-medieval style stupa. Well, what does that mean? That means it had the basic elements of earlier stupas. We already saw, remember, before the break, one of the oldest ones. But the differences are that the domes have been pulled upward or elongated. That's really the right word, elongated or pulled upward, the domes. This is the main dome. So that means beneath this dome is where the religious relics would be kept. But is it really a dome or a tower? Well, it opens up, it curves upward, and it opens, or is open, I should say, all the way to the top, and then it's got a curved top. So it qualifies as a elongated dome. But that's also true for the other three there. So there are four domes here, and they're all pulled upward or elongated. This one less so than the others. But the main dome or central dome, beneath which the religious relics would have been kept, and which worshipers would walk, remember, around those relics in a clockwise direction. I already gave that definition of a stupa. This qualifies as a stupa, just a very different style of it. Okay, another thing that's different about it is it's on a raised, these are all really distinct features in this slide. And again, it has a high, I won't say probability, but possibility of being on the final, won't be cut from the study list. It's on a platform, or base is a better word, a raised base or platform, which is an important detail because that symbolizes, any stupa on a raised base or platform symbolizes that that space, sacred space, you know, that is the actual temple, is separated from the mundane world. You could say above it, the everyday world around it, symbolically separated by being on set on top of a raised platform or base. You can't see all of it here. Let me see. I might have another view. I'm trying to remember if I was able to. No, that's some of the details on this. There's another type of stupa, but I don't want to confuse you here. See, this one just has one very prominent elongated dome. Same type of stupa, mid-medieval, but
That one doesn't really look like a dome. It looks more like a pyramid.
Yeah,
like a dome on top.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the term that a historian or architectural historian would use for the shape. I know, I understand what you're saying. It's you saying this even more so than these here. These curve more, slightly more noticeably towards the top, these domes. But they're called domes by the architectural historians from India where these styles were created. And that's the terminology we use, is taken from their, you know, preferred terminology as isn't translated into English. But you know, that last one definitely does look a little more, I see what you mean. But it's not the must know, this one is. Just to show you that there were others, and I wasn't sure if I had a more detailed view of this. But this actually is a good view of it, a good angle, because even though you don't see the platform, how high, it's about 10 feet above the ground. You get the idea if you just write it that way, that it's not resting on the earth, on the dirt. That's an important detail, but there's a lot more to it than that. Each of these rooms here, which are the lintel, post and lintel roofs that mark, you can say, right? Or indicate, if you prefer, the rooms that they, right? A shelter, you can say each of them has, each of these are prayer rooms is the main point. There are 4 prayer rooms. From the entrance is the entrance, of course, should be obvious. The stairs are on this side. So you enter through the smallest prayer room, and then you pass through 2 more to get to the main prayer room in the center. And it even has an extra, you can say portico, but that implies the facade of the structure is supported by columns. It's not. These are decorative. So I wouldn't use the word portico. I would just say, you can say space or room. Prayer room is the right phrase, right? Which is delineated. That's the best word to use, delineated, right, by these projecting lintels and posts, or posts and lintels. And yes, remember the phrase goes all the way back to prehistoric times, with the first use we saw was in Stonehenge. So it's almost, as I said, it's a universal system of design or construction for architecture all over the world. All right, so these prayer rooms have lintels and posts, right, protruding slightly to delineate them. What happens in these prayer rooms is another important part of the meaning of this slide. Various religious ceremonies, prayers, chanting, singing, meditation, and dancing, or all of the above, maybe in alternating, time frames. I mean, alternating order, I meant. Could be all in one ceremony. So again, various religious ceremonial activities or ceremonies: praying, meditating, chanting, singing, and dancing. In each one of these prayer rooms, those activities could be conducted, and of course they would have been conducted by Hindu priests with their worshipers, their followers. Okay, and then finally we have the elongated. Let's get up close to a couple, well, the two main ones here, I think. There we go. These have very prominent finials, especially the two tallest domes. And yet it's the same concept as in the older, simpler version of stupas that we saw before the break, that there would be finials. But here they're different style finials. They don't use discs, they use urns. And that's an interesting parallel with ancient Greece. Remember, in Rome, urns were sacred images for the dead, mostly, right? Often containing the cremated remains of the person that was, the temple was dedicated to, or built by, or the god that they were supposed to worship. So you could just say that there's no ashes in these, so don't hopefully conflate those two things. Just say that they're very urn-like shaped finials, but they still have the same function as finials on the earlier style stupas, which is to point towards the skies. Again, if you say heaven, that's not right. They don't have that concept. So you could say towards enlightenment or towards the universe. And then one final thing you can't see here, and the slide that I used to use, but it somehow, I couldn't find it on the internet, and it's definitely not in Stockstead. That's where I got these slides, from Stockstead's own files, which is that on the base, the Hindu priests would, almost always, except when it's heavy rains, and that's a large, just say would continuously create. There we go. And when they get washed away by the rains, they'd make new ones. So I'll just say continually create diagrams of the universe called mandalas. Don't confuse them with the name of the incredibly important leader of South Africa that helped get them over Mandela, right? The first president of free, right? African president of South Africa. Not that spelling, it's mandala, M-A-N-D-A-L-A. It's not a term on your listed definition, so you don't have to remember it as a freestanding or independent definition. It's just a feature of this period, of these kinds of stupas, these mid-medieval Hindu stupas with a raised platform, and that on the platform, the Hindu monks, and they're sometimes called monks or priests, would continually create different diagrams of the universe on the flat surface outside the temple. And that's meant to symbolize, if not inspire, the worshipers who come there with the quest for enlightenment, which both that is one thing in common between Hinduism and Buddhism. And the purposes of both Hindu and Buddhist temples or stupas were to help you in the path of enlightenment. So if you saw one of those diagrams, well, how were they made? They weren't drawn with chalk. Well, maybe now they are, but traditionally they would have been done out of pieces of objects, I meant to say objects from nature, such as rocks, twigs, dirt, stones, smaller stones and larger ones, twigs, leaves. Yeah, different ways of creating. These are pretty large, some of them 10 feet across in diameter, because these platforms are quite wide. I know you can't sell that from this slide, but I've seen documentary on this type of architecture. And so the platforms would be several feet wide, and of course as long as the structure and surrounding it. So they could put multiple mandalas, M-A-N-D-A-L-A, or diagrams of the cosmos or the universe. I think it's a better way to say universe. When I think of cosmos, I think of Russian astronauts. So, but that word is appropriate. That's what it means, of course, of the universe, which would be to help the worshipers when they arrive, by looking at it, become contemplative or meditative. So they get in the right frame of mind to seek enlightenment. And then when they go inside the actual temple and they engage in these religious ceremonies, they're in the right frame of mind. So they would have created these mandalas and left them there. And then when they're washed away or blown away, they would put new ones up. Okay, that's the whole meaning on this slide. So let's now do our formal analysis. Because we're looking at a side view, I'm just going to have to tell you that there are two ways of looking at balance with this structure, as you might imagine. With architecture, absolutely, obviously true of all works of architecture, real buildings or structures, not photos of them. You have to imagine where, first where your view, the photo is taken from, and then walking around it, you can see or tell, and I'm just going to tell you, of course, whether it was balanced left to right or top to bottom from different views or different aspects. Well, just say this is obviously unbalanced toward the left because of the height and the weight or size of the taller, especially the tallest dome. Okay, obviously it weights it or unbalances toward the left. But if you were to walk around here and stand in front of it at the stairs right above or right at the entrance, it would be completely symmetrical, left to right. And of course, so it's both symmetrical from one angle, from the front entrance angle, and unbalanced, of course, on from left to right on this one. And then therefore, it clearly, though, it's unbalanced toward the bottom, top to bottom, on no matter what angle you look at. Okay, color, it's warm. It's a warm kind of pinkish sandstone. So there is the real texture of the rough stone, but most of the texture is simulated texture because there are Hindu deities. You can see them all the way in decorative details. And they're all the way up the tops, to the top, I should say, of these towers or these domes. Decorative patterns, geometric patterns, and Hindu figures of Hindu deities. And those are done with carved line. And so, but the texture is simulated on the carved figures and rough, real texture of stone on the rest of the walls. Modeling is very strong under each of these lintels here, right? And it's deep shadows created, of course, by the sun. The largest mass, that's pretty easy, the tallest dome, right? Which is obviously therefore on the far left. And then the second largest mass would be, I guess you could call it the middle dome, but there's really actually 4 domes here. So however you want to phrase that, the second tallest dome would be the second largest mass. And then I would say, or no, there's some people would say the base, or the overall, the bottom portion, the base all the way down to the foundation. If you consider that a single mass, then it's a close call. Maybe that is the largest mass, but I still think you'd have to say the tower, or sorry, I meant tallest dome, because it's so high and so massive, so wide. So that would still be the tallest. Then you can make the case that if you call this one mass, some people would, because it depends on where you divide each of these, protruding sections here. But if you call it all one mass below each of the lintels or prayer rooms, then that's the second largest mass. And then the third largest would be the second largest dome. Space is very specific. there are several open domed rooms with varying heights, but the only one you'll have to remember is the main dome, or largest or tallest, if you prefer to say a dome, which is reaches a height of about 100 feet. Now that's from the ground, because you don't see the bottom 10 feet here. I have no idea why this photo or why it was cropped like this. It kind of drives me crazy, but it's about a 10-foot raise from the ground to the platform. And then it's about 90 feet from the base of the building to the top of the finial. So altogether, the height from the ground to the top of the tallest dome is about 100 feet. That would be, therefore, be the height above, the earth of the largest dome space. It's the only measurement you should include in your notes, and the others are varying heights. Okay. And then we have the rhythm of very obvious with the domes tapering towards, the round tops and finials. This one looks like the finials here alternate, there's somewhat of the old style disc style finial here, isn't there? That's missing the point at the very top. And then we have two urn-like ones, so it's alternating. But those create rhythm. There are two types of finials. And obviously the prayer rooms with those lintels and posts above each create rhythm, as do the carved figures and the decorative geometric patterns on the facade. Powerful rhythm. And then I think I already said the modeling, right, is just the shadows from the sun created by, the sun itself. There's no technique for it. Let's see, am I forgetting anything? Color, yes, it is warm. Texture, real, rough stone. Yeah, I think we covered it, all of that. Features on this one. So I forgot something. I always think I forgot something. All right, so we'll move on now. These are details that you don't have to write about from one of the panels along the side of this. That's a different one. So I'm going to keep going till we get to, that's a very interesting image there. I figured 8 slides was enough, but actually I think we might end up having to cut one because oh no, there we go. There we go. Don't cut it. That's right. I was looking for this because not every edition of Stuxnet has the same slides. As you know, they try to alter each edition of any textbook to try and promote sales so that you feel you have to buy the new edition, at least if you're a teacher. But most of us don't fall for that promo. Okay, so this is Reclining Buddha. Reclining Buddha. And we've already spelled Buddha, right? B-U-D-D-H-A. Sri Lanka. And that's 2 words, of course, the location, the country, Sri Lanka. S-R-I and then L-A-N-K-A. Second word. And then it's circa or about 1200 A.D. Well, we already know who Buddha is. So that's, if this slide is on the exam, I'm not saying it's so important, I absolutely won't cut it, but if I don't and it appears on the final, you could describe one of the main parts of the meaning is, who Buddha was. We've already covered that, so I don't need to restate that. And also his, religious or philosophical beliefs, you could say his teachings, which emphasized the Eightfold Path to Enlightenment, which of course you only need to remember 5 of those elements. Now, how that might appear, just as a tip for study purposes, is I might say the Buddhism teaches that there's an eightfold path to enlightenment, including right thinking, right action, right attitude, right livelihood, and right clothing. Well, that'd be obviously false because that's not one of them. The way you dress has nothing to do with it. So it's, again, right attitude, right thinking, right action, right, and right livelihood. Anybody remember the 5th one? Let's see, because you guys took notes, so I hope you all got them.
Right speech?
Yes, thank you. There you go. So those 5, those are actually in listed in Stockstead, But I only asked you to remember 5 because that's enough. Those are the main ones from friends of mine who, well, not all of them. Oh, I did want to ask, I forget who it was, this one of your fellow students who mentioned about an ashram before the break. They're still with us, right? I think so. The
Oh,
attendant.
yeah.
Where was that ashram and what was it called?
Oh, it's, I mean, I just know it as the Sonoma Ashram, and it's by Sonoma Mission Gardens and the dog park.
Where's that exactly?
I
What
don't,
city? What town?
it's in Sonoma.
Oh, the town of Sonoma, not just the
Yeah,
county.
yeah,
Oh,
Sonoma, it's literally next to the nursery, Sonoma Mission Gardens.
oh, okay. All
Yeah,
right.
it's
And it's
on
called, how do you spell it?
nondescript street,
What's the spelling of it?
Sonoma Ashram.
Oh, just that, Sonoma Ashram. Okay. It's
Yeah,
pretty
and I
sweet.
think it's a Hindu tradition. They
People
have
could
the-
look it up online then, right? I assume it has a website. Everything does these days, right? Would people be welcome to go there if they wanted to on their own? Or would
I mean, it is a little like church, and I remember the first time that I was there, the Babaji saw me, and he was like, "Oh, like what are you doing here? Who invited you here?" You know, he didn't, because he had never seen me there before, and you know, I was invited from a friend, so
So
I
that's all
ended
you
up-
do is mention, yeah, it might be best to wait till you have someone or contact someone to see if they'll invite you. Well, I don't know, I've never been to an ashram, but I have many friends who have. There's one in Berkeley on the border almost with Oakland, and it's pretty well established. It's been there for decades on San Pablo Avenue at Ashby. You know where that is?
Yeah.
A long time. Then there's another one in the Berkeley Hills that's more recent, but it's really well situated. It's just below the hills, just around the it is south of the UC Berkeley campus. And there, I know they welcome people, especially students for the first time. But I don't know how you get it. Anyway, just something to consider. I actually have been through Buddhist ceremonies in mass ceremonial gathering at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium, which is huge, 5,000 people. That's where they used to hold the Academy Awards before they moved them to wherever it is in Hollywood now. And I used to watch them, red carpet in the 60s when I was in school in Santa Monica. My mother would take us, and we knew who the actors were, right? Anyway, the point is that inside that auditorium, when I was at Berkeley, by now it's decades or more after that, my childhood experience, it was taken over by the Nichiren Shoshu. Do you know what that is? Nichiren Shoshu Buddhist sect. And they teach that there's a shortened way. It's not the traditional path to enlightenment that Buddha taught. It's typically Americanized, or maybe it's not even just American, you could say Westernized version of Buddhism, a shortcut to Buddhism, if you could call it, right? Or Buddhism for dummies. When I went once, and that's all I need, because it wasn't really anything that I've ever heard true Buddhist ceremonies would have focused on, and that was how to get what you want out of life, whether it's a Mercedes or a really good job or a raise or fancy clothes. And what? That isn't what Buddha was. So you would chant, but they didn't say that until after the room was so high from natural chanting for, I think it was a half hour, 5,000 people over and over. I practiced, so I knew how to do it. Namyo, sorry, I can't do it. Namyo, I can't say it now. It's been too many years. Rengekyo, Namyo, Rengekyo, Namyo, Rengekyo. Yeah, that's it. It was a rhythm. It was the whole, kind of trance-like state that they wanted people to fall into. Anyway, that isn't what I would call the authentic Buddhism. But where we need to look at now, we've got one more slide that's really important before we finish, and we're still in quite early. Probably close to 9. But this one is interesting because it's a different image of Buddha than you usually would see. He's obviously asleep. He's not meditating. Well, maybe he is in a way, subconsciously, or, in his sleep, in his dreams. But it's over 100-foot long, carved out of living rock. And this is a tradition. I already hinted at it. Let's just go back and you'll see what I mean. When we get to the ones in Afghanistan. There. So carving out of living rock is a tradition in world cultures all around the globe, all around the earth. We saw some of the evidence of that with ancient Egyptian and other temples, right?
I'm sorry, I do have a question. On one of the images that you show us, are those like houses that this is,
Where,
Like-
which image? Ones that we skipped, I skipped over?
yeah, the one that has like a really huge Buddha, like a sculpture. And then you say that something with the Taliban shooting or,
Oh, no, no, this is the, okay, we were just looking at it. Yeah, you mean this.
what is this?
This is just a shrine, a
Oh,
Buddhist shrine carved out of a mountain side in Afghanistan.
like,
Oh,
like-
oh, you might be asking about these. Yeah,
Yeah.
some of the Buddhist monks would live in these caves.
Oh.
Yeah. And
It
they might
almost-
have smaller, so I see, I think I understand why you're asking. Yeah, interesting point, because quite often they would live in these caves or at least conduct religious ceremonies. You know, meditation and, you know, enlightenment ceremonies inside these recessed caves. I can tell you one spot on earth, it's, yeah, it's safe to go now, Jordan. And that's, it was in a Steven Spielberg movie. Not Temple of Doom, that wasn't the name of it. I can't remember what it was called. Not Raiders of the Lost Ark, one of the other Indiana Jones movies where he goes to a temple at the end. That's in Petra. Good
I
God.
believe that would be Crystal Skull is, that might be that one. Oh, no, I think, no, it's Temple
No,
of
it's
Doom.
not that
Temple
one,
of
because
Doom.
yeah, this is one, Jordan, they actually went to Jordan, and I got to spend several days in Jordan. What a fascinating country it is. They're at peace at least 99% of the time with their neighbor Israel and all their Arab neighbors. And they are a kingdom, they have a king, right? But an enlightened one, relatively. There's more freedom of speech and freedom in general there than there is in a lot of other countries in that part of the world. In any case, they are proud to show any tourist, and groups of people will go, but they're very controlled about how many people. It's a World Heritage Site. It's called Petra, the rose red city of the desert. There's no place like it on earth. A whole city carved out of the side of rocks, and including the houses where people lived. And they're in the side of cliffs just like that. So those, you actually were right about that point you raised a moment ago. Those were kind of houses set aside on either side, I mean, of the carving. Okay, this one isn't like that. This is just a carving of a gigantic image of Buddha at rest. And of course, when he traveled around, well, it's not obvious, but you can now add this in your notes, that when Buddha traveled around India, preaching is an okay word to use. You know, his religious belief or system, you can say, or his even philosophy, preaching Buddhism and how to gain enlightenment. He was a guest in many different towns and people's homes, so he would be provided a place to sleep, and he never needed any fancy bedding. Is the thing. All he needed is some kind of a pillow. You see it there for his head. He often would sleep on the floor or on a very hard wooden bed, and that's part of the aesthetic. It's called the belief system of at least many Buddhist monks, even today, but it certainly was back then, Buddha himself. He didn't ask for, in fact, he would even feel it's, you know, excessive maybe, or inappropriate to offer him any fancy accommodations, or let alone fancy bedding. And he often slept outside too. He often slept outside. Now that seems risky in a jungle-like climate where there are kinds of poisonous animals, but apparently, obviously, he lived to be 80, by the way. 80 years old, even now, that's not a bad life, but back then, that's remarkable long life. And he was in good health till the very end. Toward the end, his health declined, but only the last few months of his life. So he was quite healthy up until he was 80. It's pretty impressive. So this shows him, as we know, he was tall and thin, right? And with these elongated earlobes, right? And he's in a contemplative, you could say, you know, dreamlike state, I guess. And he's at peace. And the only thing he needed was a pillow for his head. Otherwise, he could sleep anywhere, indoors or outdoors, you know, hard bed, on the ground, on the floor. Okay, and it's about 100 feet long. So it's one of the largest statues of Buddha in the world, and maybe the largest now, after the Taliban destroyed those that were 120. I think there were three different sizes: 120, 30, and 50, somewhere between 120, 150 feet. All three of those are destroyed. So this may be, if not the, it's one of the tallest statues remaining, statues of Buddha. So that's pretty much the whole meaning. So also you notice that he's attired very simply. He's got a robe on here. You can actually see the edges of the robe, and it does cover his physique a little more than that one standing Buddha statue we saw. And there's no halo around him. When this was created, when we look at the date here, I mean, it's not, super late, but it's late. It's late medieval. In fact, that is the right word. Late medieval, from the 1200s to the 15 to about 1500 is in Europe. It's actually the late Middle Ages, the period of the great cathedrals, which we will talk about when we get to that part of the class. So just say this is a late medieval period. A more naturalistic is how I would say it. You could say realistic if you prefer, but the word implies that, and also that's what we really think he is close to what he looked like. People who knew him while he was alive created images of him, paintings, carving, sculpture, coins even were created while he was alive of an image of him, at least his face, and then in some cases his whole body. So we have a good idea of what he looked like. So that, the fat seated laughing Buddha is, I don't know where that came from exactly, but it's not very accurate. All right, let's do a formal analysis. It's a cool gray color. The Simea texture is excellent because you see it on his face, on his hair especially, but also his hands and feet. And then there is some on his clothes. You see the robe, the fabric, whatever thin fabric it is, you can see the texture, but there is also the rough texture of the stone itself visible. And then it's really one single mass. I don't think you can break it down into any other part. That's the cliff it was carved from, so that's not part of the sculpture. So it's one single mass about 100 feet long. And so for space, it is a real object. A human body, colossal, you could say gigantic, but the right word is colossal scale, right? Like so many statues in the ancient world were, and it's 100 feet long. And it has overlapping, of course, of the clothing over his body. The rhythm is obvious with the hands, arms, legs, feet, and the features of the face. Simea texture is created by carved line on the face, the clothing, the hands, and the feet. It's balanced like all intact human bodies would be, right? If you drew a line down the middle, top to bottom, and of course, left to right, symmetrical. Here, the shadows from the sun would create modeling, but in this photo, there isn't really any modeling. So there's no technique for modeling, just natural modeling. Texture, balance. Oh, and it is mostly stable, really almost entirely. I mean, there's obviously the curve of his shoulder and the top of his head, but his body is lying pretty much in a straight line, and his pose is pretty much straight as much as you can when you're lying sideways like this. So it's mostly stable with some dynamic detailing of the hips and the top of the head. And I guess the fingers and toes. Okay, let's move on. Now, I'm trying to see, I think, yeah, we need to do Descent of the Ganges, and then we'll end with Shiva. Okay. So this is the next must know. And again, I'm not saying that this is so important that I absolutely won't cut it from the study list, but it's an important work enough that it could be on either the ID part, of course, or the slide essay part of the final. Then again, we may cut it. You just need to attend the last lecture before the final, which is the review session the week before the final. Okay, so what do we mean by Descent of the Ganges? Well, the name of this work, which is carved out of living rock, just like that last piece we saw, but this is a multitude of figures. So this is a Hindu shrine, not a temple, don't call it that, but a shrine where you could come to worship, to pray or meditate, which symbolizes the duty of all true Hindus to go to India, if they don't already live there, or if they're in India, to go to the Ganges River. I think most of you know, if you've not heard this, you need to write it, that the Ganges River, and the title, of course, has the spelling in it. The Ganges River is the most sacred spot in India to Hindus. And you're supposed to descend or go down the Ganges River, either swimming or on a raft or in a boat, but one way or another, you're supposed to descend the Ganges from near the head of the river down, I don't know how far, but just say, for at least a few days. It's a pilgrimage. Literally every religion has that. The Jews go to if they can do it, they go to the Wailing Wall, right? not whaling, that sounds like people at sea with harpoons, Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. Obviously, good Catholics should go to the Vatican and hear the Pope speak and go into St. Peter's. And then, of course, Muslims are right now going to go to Mecca in Arabia to the Hajj. It's called the pilgrimage. So almost all major religions have, world religions have this kind of ritual where you're supposed to do once in your lifetime while you're on this earth some kind of pilgrimage to a certain place, a holy place. And for Hindus, it's the Ganges River. So here is the river in the middle, supposedly, with all these Hindu gods and goddesses, as well as sacred or holy creatures. And it was never completed, if it's not obvious. There was a plague, who knows, it could have been any number of things that could have caused this project to not be ever totally completed, but it's 3/4 of it, or a little more, isn't it? If you add up the total surface of the stone, the cliff, it's a cliff, so it's a living sculpture. That's what they call this, carved out of living rock, not assembled from some other spot. So the sacred animals in India are, of course, we've covered some of them. Cows, yes, but here we see elephants, and I believe there isn't a close-up here, is there? No, there isn't. So there's a map of India. That's a good one to take a look at for a second, but we want to get back to this. So I'll do a close-up here. You see the father elephant, the baby elephant, right? And the mama elephant. So it's an elephant family. Then we have cobras. They are considered sacred creatures. But the cobras, some of them are just cobras, snakes by themselves. They'd be sacred animals. And monkeys can be considered sacred as well, at least in some aspects of Hindu religion. And here's a monkey. But there's also cobra gods and goddesses, a half god or deity and half snake. The body, partly the upper part is a deity and the bottom part is a snake. And then my favorite detail, besides the elephants, they're so charming, of course, is the stupa. There's the stupa, one of the early style stupas with the regular dome and the lintel and the gateway. It's of course a small compressed image of a stupa. Obviously it would be much wider if they had more room. And inside is either a statue of a deity, but it's hard to tell, or it could be a Hindu priest greeting people, welcoming them. You see with a hand raised to come in. But my favorite detail here is based upon, I think we can see it. Yes, the cat trying to, well, where is the cat? We don't see it that clearly on this view. Why don't I see the cat? I've shown this slide, a different version of this slide, where you can see a cat, which is is seducing mice to go down into the river. I guess it might have broken off. This has been here for centuries, and for decades it's been photographed. It's one of the most famous Hindu sites in India. Okay, so we can't see the cat here.
Dogs?
Dogs? Where?
Yeah. Next to the sheep.
Further up? Oh yeah, you mean here, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, it looks like it to me. I'm not sure. Whoops, I meant to make that larger. I think they are, yeah. But I know that there are dogs and cats. You don't have to know where they are. If it's on the exam, you'll have to identify the details as to the location. So you could just say there are cats and dogs, monkeys. And the sacred animals are the cobras and the elephants. I'm not sure, I've been told, anybody want to speak up, that monkeys are also considered lesser, but not still unimportant animals. They're sort of sacred.
There's like a monkey god
that
they worship.
Right. So,
Hanuman.
Yeah, good point. So they can be considered sacred creatures. The one thing I don't see here is a cat with a flute, seducing mice to jump into the river Ganges to their death, which of course sounds familiar, like the Pied Piper, or some of you know of Hamlet. I don't see that cat here, so it could be that it looks like, yes, it's been, oh, look at that. Someone damaged, oh, that's obvious, because it was down at this corner. See, I've been showing this slide for decades, including ones that friends of mine took when they were in India, a couple of other teachers I knew even before I started teaching at the JC. And I finally, when I started teaching here, I asked them for copies of them, but I don't know, there were slides, though, see, actual slides. So it never got digitalized. So you can just say cats and dogs are shown at different parts, or were originally shown. Yeah, the cat was here, right there where it's been, somebody took it off and took it home. What a despicable vandalist act. Anyway, what's left is maybe less obvious, but yeah, they're cats and dogs. Actually, I think this might even be a cat here. Kind of looks like one. So you can just say that various creatures, some of which are not sacred, cats and dogs. I don't believe either of those are sacred to Hindus, but the monkeys and the elephants and the cobras would be, and then dozens of deities. Okay, that's pretty much the whole meaning. And so this is near the river itself. It's on a cliff above the Ganges, by the way. In northern India, the Ganges is a long river, runs, I think, nearly the length of India. Let's go to that map. Let's see. You don't have to know this. There it is. Yeah, look how long it is. Yeah, goes from the
Professor,
mountain.
sorry to interrupt. Did you already say the date for this?
Yeah, I did, but I'll say it again. Sure, of course, it's important to make sure we have that. This is 674 AD. So it's early medieval, which is, again, a term to just distinguish what period of history it is. It doesn't tie it into European art history. That's a different thing. You see here how the river runs, actually runs all the way into what's now Bangladesh, but it's, I think, the longest river in India, or one of the two longest. The other would be the Indus, but it's the most holy or sacred river to Hindus. Let's go back to this so we can do a formal analysis, and then we have one more must know, and we're still going to end quite early. Okay, so I think we've covered the meaning here pretty well. So let's do our 9 elements of composition. Okay, we'll start with the color. It's a warm sand color, and this slide, at least on my screen, I don't know how it looks to you guys. Maybe it depends on which way you tilt your screen. It makes it look pink. Well, that'd still be warm, but it's actually a sand color because this is sandstone. That's, I don't think, a minor detail. That is the softest hard stone. Stone can be so soft it shatters and you can't carve it. Some kinds of stones you cannot carve anything out of it. It just isn't strong enough. So this is the softest kind of stone that can be used to carve anything. It's called sandstone. I think I've mentioned that material before. So sandstone is the color of sand. Obviously, the color of sand, literally sand colored, and that is therefore obviously an earth tone or warm tone. The simulated texture is superb on this, isn't it? When you look closely, especially, I think things like the details of the ears and eyes of the elephants, and yeah, the monkey figures, right, and the cobras and the stupa. It's all done with carved line, and it's very sharp and realistic on both the actual animals and sacred and not sacred animals, as well as on the deities, and of course that one object or shrine, which is a small stupa. All of it's done very sharp carved line. There's no painted line here. There is modeling. It's part of the composition here because it's a bas-relief set. It's, one panel, it's a set of different panels without the shadows from the sun that the artist calculated when the sun hits what the shadows would look like. You couldn't see it. So it's part of the composition. There is a technique for modeling here. The deep shadows created by the carved stone from the sun. It's not balanced now, but it would have been, if it had been completed, roughly balanced left to right and top to bottom, right? Roughly. So how you want to describe it now, the actual site is balanced. Obviously, it's one big long rectangular, rather oblong, I should say, piece of stone or cliff rather. But on the other hand, if you're looking at it now, you'd probably say it's weighted or unbalanced toward the right because this is a plane surface here, and towards the top, unbalanced toward the top. The rhythm is obvious with repeated deities, snakes, monkeys, cats, dogs, elephants, and of course the arms, hands, and legs of the various animals. Well, no hands on the animals, the arms, hands, paws, whatever, legs, heads of both the animal and deity figures. Okay, and then let's see, we have stable. it's more dynamic than stable because each figure is in motion pretty much, but the stupa is stable. And I would argue that the elephant, at least the father, Papa elephant, you want to say, is mostly stable, although his back curves, of course. He's in a mostly stable pose, at least his legs are. However, there's dynamic detail on, of course, the mother or mama elephant and the baby. And almost all the deities and animals are carved in, diagonal or curved lines. So it's mostly a dynamic piece with a stable detail or two here, like on the stupa and the poses, at least of the front part of the elephant's body. And some of the deities are standing upright, but more dynamic, clearly. Let's see. Mass. Well, it's the father elephant, I would say, and then the mother elephant. And then it's hard to say. One of the tallest deities, maybe this one, or is it the stupa is the third largest, you decide. Isn't that a deer here? Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, it is. All right. And then we have for space, these are high relief or bas relief, you can say highly raised bas relief figures on a flat background. So they do overlap the background, and some of them overlap each other, though most of them don't. Or they don't overlap each other. That's right. They wouldn't, because, well, this here, yes, you do see a few of the figures overlap each other, but mostly what we have is, real space figures overlapping the background in real space. And there really isn't any other, some minimal amount of overlapping on a few of the deities figures. And then the real space, this is a cliff about 30 feet high and about 80 feet long. So that's real space. All right, let's wrap it up with Shiva, our last figure for tonight. See, here's just a quick, you don't have to take notes now, but you can see how the differences in the styles of stupas. See, your comment, I forget who was it, talked about the pyramid-like shape. Yeah, this is a good graph or graphic diagram, whatever is what I call it, for you to see the slight differences. Northern style, late medieval, in other words, in the north of India is somewhat different than the late medieval stupa in the south of India. Right? One is a bit more pyramidal, and the other is more elongated. Oh, but then the traditional earlier form of stupa would be the main dome here with they say umbrellas or discs. I've heard both. And instead of a pointing, it is a finial. Mast, I wouldn't use that word, but you can. But you don't have to add anything to your notes. You've got enough. But you can get at a glance a good idea of the differences here. All right, let's finish up with this. This slide is one that's important enough. I'm definitely not cutting it from the study list. It's our last must know for tonight. Shiva from Tamil Nadu. Shiva, Shiva, from Tamil, two words, Tamil, and then Nadu. And the location of the country of India. The date is, again, circa or about, I don't have the exact year, 1100 AD, which makes this a late medieval piece of sculpture. I'm going to go back to the map because I wanted to see if no, they don't. I forgot to say Sri Lanka is an island on the meaning of the reclining. Most of you know that. It used to be called Ceylon. It sure was when I was going up, but nobody says that anymore. So the name of the country now is Sri. It's a separate country. It was never part of India, though it's right next to the coast of India. Okay, so Tamil Nadu is in northern. I just don't know exactly what part of India, but in northern India. It's a state or district in northern India. And it has some of the most detailed images of metal sculpture of Shiva and other Hindu deities. I've said this before when we had the Shiva from the cave temple before the break, right? But I'll repeat the points because it's really more likely to appear with this slide than that one. If either one is on the exam, you'd want to know. Shiva was one of the most powerful, is still, right? One of the most powerful Hindu deities. And Shiva has within, I'm going to say it's okay, power, the duality of power, the dual aspect, that's a better word, dual aspect, of power over life and death, over the creative and destructive forces of the universe, and over the male and female aspects of living beings, or you would say of the human beings. Okay, and you see the multiple arms here. I was saying earlier, if you see the whole body, well, now you do. 4 arms is common. I've seen some with 6 in some museums, but I think it's usually 4 arms. And there's a reason for that, because one of them has the hand raised that we've been talking about now a couple times tonight, symbolic of welcoming you to become enlightened, to join this religious ceremony or the state of mind, the meditation or contemplation that you should have when you want to, attempt to become more enlightened. But the other of the 2 that we have to focus on, the other arm here, of the 2 that are pointing towards or on the right side of this figure, is pointing down towards a figure of all things of a dwarf, which is symbolic of the evil in the universe. And Shiva is so powerful that Shiva is able to dominate, totally contain or control, you could say either way or both words, contain or control the forces of evil. And that's why this and all the other I've ever seen dozens of these figures, and you can see them at the Asian Art Museum, of Shiva, especially the metal sculpture ones, that show Shiva standing on top of a dwarf, meaning dominating and controlling or containing the forces of evil in the universe. And then the flames, these are supposed to be flames, not hands, very pointed fingers. I know it looks, for some people, that's what they think, but no, these are flames. They're supposed to symbolize the destructive elements or forces in the universe, fire, literally. And then the divine energy that radiates out is similar to the idea of a halo, like the one behind Buddha, the standing Buddhist figure. But I don't remember seeing halos in Hindu deity figures. It's
Oh, sorry,
more,
is that like a dragon face head?
say again,
Like a dragon head, like this one?
dragon. You're saying this looks like dragons? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, now that you close it, or no, but
I understand why you're saying
The
that. Yeah.
headdress.
Sure. No, I understand. Well, the headdress is typical of Shiva. That Shiva always had a fancy, very tall.
when I see it like from here,
You're
I
saying this?
thought like a
Yeah.
no,
No,
that it's on the left. I thought it was like a dragon head.
that does look like one. If you look at it close enough, you can see that. And
Or a
I-
rabbit. I see a rabbit.
Well, let's just say I don't know, so I wouldn't write that, but it could be, but that it's necessarily meant to evoke an image of a a creature, mythical or real, so much as just the ornate, fancy, detailed or decorative tall headdress on top of Shiva's head always symbolizes the importance of Shiva as one of the most powerful of all Hindu gods. And then what's missing here is a drum in this hand. And I'm surprised because the Shivas I've seen in other, museum actual live, three-dimensional objects, often one of the arms is outstretched with a drum. Well, actually, wait a minute. I think that's here. Wait, sorry, I keep doing that. I think it's supposed to be a hint of a castanet, some people would call it. It's a small musical. That's what it looks like. Anyway, you could just say that often, just keep it simple and say in your notes, often that sculptures of Shiva are shown with one of Shiva's arms holding a small drum, which is symbolic of the forces of creativity, music, positive energy in the universe, creative things such as music and art. And Shiva would have control over that, over the arts, performing arts and visual arts. So it's a very powerful diva. And of course, some people say the most powerful and important of all Hindu deities. and is always shown dancing, like I said, in an odd kind of a balance pose here, but in a pose where there's clearly not just movement, but dance being depicted. And that also is indicative of Shiva's power over performing arts, along with visual arts, life, creative energy in the universe, all those positive things. So the positive energy, in my mind at least, and many other people I've talked to, though I'm not in any way closely associated with anyone who devoutly practices Hinduism. So if you want to correct me, fine. But is that the positive energy aspects of Shiva, the control that Shiva has over positive energy outweigh the negative. But she, he, it, or just, or they, right? However you want to put it, just Shiva, right? Does have nonetheless always the images of Shiva always show the negative energy of the universe too, both symbolized by the flames in this outer circle, as well as the dwarf that Shiva is standing on, and therefore containing or controlling all the destructive forces of the universe. Okay, that's pretty much the whole meaning of this piece. So let's do a formal analysis, and then I will stick around for just about 2 minutes while I summarize, the upcoming deadlines and process for your papers, your second papers, and then I'll take any questions you have. Okay, this is about a 2 foot tall piece of sculpture. They can be quite large. Some of them are, basically almost like an adult human's figure, but that's rare. Usually they're smaller than life. So this is in terms of space, it's a 3-dimensional object, obviously in real space. There is overlapping of it's just jewelry is what it is, right? Anklets, right? Bracelets, necklaces, there's some overlapping, but mostly it's a real space of about a 2 foot tall figure of the deity or goddess. Without really any other technique for space. I guess you could say, yes, Diva's foot overlaps the dwarf down below. And it is a cool color. This is actually the real color. They almost always in this kind of a bluish bronze. It's bronze. The material is the real smooth texture. In other words, of the material is a real smooth for the texture of the metal or bronze, if you want to get specific. But they're clearly simulate texture on the face, the hands, the feet, and it's supposed to be on the fire, the flames, whether it looks realistic to you or not, but it's all done with carved line. Of course, this is from a mold. So carved line only is used, not painted line, to create the textures of the flames and the, you can say accessories or jewelry on the body of Shiva. But the rest of it is pretty obvious. The smooth parts of the real smooth metal texture. The modeling is just the shadows from the museum. The largest mass, easy, Shiva. Then the Ring of Fire, not to quote Johnny Cash, right? And then it's a close call between the base. If you count the base just as everything below and not including this little dwarf figure, I guess it'd be the 3rd largest. It's part of the original sculpture, the 3rd largest mass. Otherwise, you might say the divine energy, rays of energy emanating from both sides of her head. Now you notice here we don't see the head or faces on the sides, the 2 faces that you saw in the cave temple. I think it's partly because of the size of the piece and how intricate it would be to do that. Usually Shiva, in larger images of Shiva, life size or bigger, it has 3 heads, but here it's just the 1. Okay, the rhythm is obvious with repeated arms, hands, legs, feet, the flames or rings of, the fire in the outer ring. So lots of rhythm. It is almost entirely dynamic. I really don't see anything stable about it. The ring itself, Shiva's body, maybe the torso somewhat, but even there's a slight diagonal because of the dancing pose. So just the base is stable. Otherwise, pretty much everything else is dynamic. And it's balanced. That's where people might get into a dispute over this, because there are 3 arms. Look carefully here on this side. You would almost have to say, and one of the legs is further over on this side, that it's unbalanced toward the right in our view, or sorry, I meant the left or the right on this figure side. But it doesn't feel unbalanced. Because the whole point of this is the balance and the power over these forces in the universe, the good, the bad, the destructive and creative life and death forces. that Shiva has that power over, as well as the symbolism of Shiva's power. So it feels roughly balanced. If you squint, it kind of does, but technically you'd have to say it's unbalanced in our view towards the left. Right. And top to bottom, it definitely is unbalanced toward the top. Okay, we've covered just about everything. Any questions on this before I stop sharing? Then I'll stick around and tell you, like I said, just a quick couple of details or specific points to remember before you start working, or certainly before you turn in your papers. Okay. Your papers, as you all should know from the syllabus, are due. It's at the bottom of this page we're on tonight, which is that is at the start of I said the start of class. I should have said midnight. I'm giving you guys a break. Cross out start of class and write midnight. 2 weeks into tonight, April 25th. I give you till midnight in case you need it. They shouldn't be difficult for you to remember, but I will summarize the fact that it needs to be turned in as a PDF. And if you want it to be logged in more quickly, graded more quickly, and give you the grade back more quickly, you should give me, the cover sheet in one, right, PDF file attached to the paper. I will send that to you. You'll say cover sheet paper number 2, filled out with your name and all that, and also to my Mark W at AOL. I think you all know that, but if it's not obvious, I guess I'll go ahead and pull that out here. And I'll do this again before. Here we go. Short paper number 2. And this is obviously you guys are 1.1, so you can see that there how I've modified it. Right? Short paper, or 1.1 short paper number 2, underline, very similar to what you did on the first one. But not everybody did this. So some of the papers got misfiled or took longer to grade, let alone return to your grade. Last name, comma, first name, and then as a PDF to Mark W at AOL.com. If you turned it in to the Outlook, I certainly will accept it. It's the official campus website. I would not accept it. And it'll be counted on time if it's in by midnight or before midnight on the 25th. But you'll get a faster response if you send it to Mark W. And then, of course, you should already have picked a topic by now. If you haven't, you really want to get going on that, because to do a good job, you will need to first read and do research and choose what sources you want, what image, and then do the writing. And you have the option of sending me, if you choose, a draft before the due date, but don't wait till the night before. You won't hear back from me, or even 24 hours. It needs at least 48 hours for it's due. So in this case, that would be like the weekend. In fact, if you send it late Sunday night, I may not see it. I'd have to teach. In fact, I won't. So you need to send to me by, let's say, Friday night before it's due. If you want me to look at it and get back to you, you have to say that. Otherwise, I'll assume, oh, you're turning your paper in early. End of story. That's it. I'll grade it. But if you just want me to look at it, you have this option. All my students in every class, I've always allowed this, to say that in your PDF, in your text, in the email. I mean, to say, not the PDF, but the email, please look this over and see if I'm missing something. And then I'll get back to you well before the due date. That's why you shouldn't do it past Friday. So you have a little time for me. I have the time to look at it and get back to you. You have the time to see if you do or don't need to make an adjustment to add something that you might be missing. There's no reason you should all get A's if you either do that, or you did already get an A, or even if you almost, you might miss by, you got 80 something, that's still a good grade. And then from the first paper and the comments about what you missed, what you need to add to the second paper. But I also can give you the specific feedback if you need it. Okay, so there's that. And that's the main announcement. And then any extra credit options, you already know what those are. I will say this, I'm not 80 to 90% certain I'm going to do a walking tour, which is worth 20 points. And it's an enjoyable, interesting, unique opportunity. It'll be on a Sunday in May. I'm pretty much decided it'll be the second or third Sunday. So it's not too close to finals, but it's early enough before you can decide if you still want those 20 points. And you can bring a guest even, but there is a small fee. Again, I do this separate from the college. You're getting an invitation to an event I would already do anyway, on my own and don't get paid for. So it's a modest amount. It's worth 20 points, and you just need to sign in with an assistant. I'll explain all of this. If I do the walking tour, I'll give you the details. From 2 to 4:30 on a Sunday in Berkeley. Parking is free at that point, on Sundays, of course, and you have to worry about meters. And there'll be an assistant, probably one of my readers there, to take your names and, sign you in for which class and take your fees. And then we walk, between historic buildings, houses, churches, whatever it is in that given Berkeley neighborhood that I'll arrange. And we'll go inside at least 2, sometimes 3 or 4 sites during that walk. And that's where you might need to wear your mask. If the owners of the houses say, obviously, let's hope there's not a sudden last minute surge again of the whatever sub variant they're calling it, BA2 or something. But it's supposedly already here, and hospitalizations, again, got to be careful. The gods don't like it when you take them for granted. But anyway, of all religions, that's true of every religion. If you assume something and you get too overconfident, you usually get disappointed in the end. So let's not assume anything. But if things are still stable the way they are in terms of the safety, hospitalization, and the mask requirements in the Bay Area, then I don't see any reason not to go on the tour. And you wouldn't have to wear your mask in between, as you want to, between each building. But when we go inside them, you would want to have your mask with you just in case the owner asked. And I would know. I'd say, this house, everyone, please put on your mask. This one, it's your choice. I'll confirm that, of course, with any owners of any buildings that we have access to. Okay, so I think the odds are really good that we'll do a tour as of one of the final opportunities for extra credit. Any questions now about anything we covered tonight? Your papers, extra credit, anything? Okay, I always give you guys a couple minutes or so, 90 seconds to give it some thought, because this is my unofficial office hours. So you have 2 weeks to do your papers. I would be working on them now. If you haven't picked one, try to pick a topic. Remember, from any period, any style, any artist. All right, everyone, have a good week as well. And you can email me if you have questions in the meantime. So yeah, did you have a question, Jessica, or no?
No, thank you.
Oh, okay, sure. Just double checking in case. All right, see you guys 1 week from tonight. And then I'll look at my email. If you have questions about your papers or anything else, just send me the question. I'll get back to you before the weekend. And this lecture will be posted on Friday night on my new second channel, right? The Mark Wilson, right? SRJC Art History Lectures 2. And you'll be able to see them by 8 p.m. Friday. Okay, take care. Bye.